The first deputy arrived while I was still standing on the bank of my own pond, holding a fishing rod in one hand and a stringer of bass in the other. Behind him came the HOA president, Patricia Vale, marching through the pasture in white tennis shoes that had never been in mud before, pointing at me like she had caught a bank robber. "That's him," she said. "He's illegally fishing in protected HOA water." The deputy looked at me. Then he looked at the pond. Then he looked at the cattle fence behind him, the ranch gate, the private property signs, and the old wooden dock my father built before Patricia's neighborhood even existed. "Sir," he asked, "is this your pond?" I said, "It's on my ranch." Patricia laughed like that was a small detail. "It may be on his land," she said, "but the water belongs to the community." That was the moment my grandson, sitting barefoot on the dock with a bluegill flopping in his bucket, looked up and said, "Grandpa, can somebody own water they're not allowed to touch?" I almost laughed. The deputy almost did too. Patricia did not. Because what she did not know was that the pond she had been calling an HOA amenity was not a lake, not a shared reservoir, not community water, and not part of her development. It was a stock pond my grandfather dug in 1957. And by the end of that week, Patricia would learn the hard way that calling the cops on a man for fishing on his own ranch is one thing. Proving you own the fish is another. Now, before I tell you how one fishing pole, one spoiled HOA president, and one county map turned a quiet Saturday morning into the most embarrassing board meeting Briar Creek Estates had ever seen, you need to understand something about my ranch. My name is Thomas Reddick. I'm 67 years old, and I have lived on Reddick Ranch my entire life. Not near it. Not beside it. On it. I was born in the old farmhouse at the top of the hill before the county hospital had a proper maternity ward. My mother used to say I came into the world during a thunderstorm, which explained why I never trusted calm skies. The ranch started with my grandfather, Amos Reddick. He bought 240 acres after returning from Korea with a limp, a mule, and a stubborn belief that land was the only thing a man could own that did not disappear when banks got nervous. Over time, the ranch grew. Not fast. Nothing good grows fast out here except weeds and rumors. My grandfather bought a pasture from a neighbor who moved west. My father added the creek bottom. I bought the northern ridge after 30 years of cattle, fencing, hay, and saying no to developers with shiny shoes and soft hands. By the time I turned 60, Reddick Ranch covered almost 600 acres of grassland, oak trees, 2 hay fields, a creek, 3 stock ponds, and 1 long gravel road that kicked up dust no matter how slowly you drove. It was not fancy. It was home. The pond where all the trouble started sat near the eastern fence line. We called it Amos Pond after my grandfather. He dug it with borrowed equipment in the summer of 1957, mostly to water cattle, partly because he loved fishing and did not believe a man should have to drive into town to catch dinner. The pond was about 3 acres when full, more in wet years, less during drought. It had cattails along one side, an old pecan tree leaning over the bank, and a wooden dock that my father built when I was 12. I learned to fish there. My son learned there. And that morning, my 8-year-old grandson, Eli, was learning there too. That was all we were doing. Fishing. Nothing dramatic. Nothing illegal. Nothing worth a 911 call. But Patricia Vale had a gift for turning ordinary life into an emergency if it gave her a chance to hold a clipboard. Patricia was the president of the Briar Creek Estates HOA, a gated community built along the eastern side of my ranch about 5 years earlier. Before Briar Creek, that land was scrub pasture owned by the Hanley family. They ran cattle on it for decades, then sold it to a developer when the taxes got too high and their kids moved away. The developer arrived with surveyors, bulldozers, and a name that sounded like it had been invented in a hotel conference room. Briar Creek Estates. There was no Briar Creek inside it. There was a drainage ditch and a retention basin. But I guess Drainage Ditch Estate does not sell houses. They built 120 homes, a clubhouse, tennis courts, walking paths, a pool, and a fake stone entrance with iron gates. The houses were large, clean, and all painted in different shades of the same beige opinion. Most of the people were fine. That is important. Most people in HOA neighborhoods are not villains. They are just people with mortgages, kids, jobs, and lawns they pay someone else to keep alive. But every neighborhood has one person who discovers authority and immediately becomes allergic to humility. At Briar Creek, that person was Patricia. I met her 6 months after the first homeowners moved in. She came to my ranch gate in a pearl-white Lexus SUV, parked halfway across the entrance like she had never considered that trucks might need to pass through, and pressed the call button 3 times even though I was already walking toward her. She was in her early 50s, with perfect hair, oversized sunglasses, a pale blue blouse, and a folder tucked under one arm. Not a regular folder. A leather folder. People with leather folders rarely bring good news. "Mr. Reddick," she asked. "That's me. I'm Patricia Vale, president of the Briar Creek Estates Homeowners Association. I don't live in Briar Creek." Her smile froze for half a second. "Yes, we're aware." That was my first warning. People who say, "we're aware," usually want you to believe there has already been a meeting about you. She looked past me toward the pasture. "We've received several concerns from residents about your livestock approaching the boundary fence." My cows approach my fence. They create visual distress. I looked at her, then looked at the cows. One of them was chewing with its mouth open, which I admit was not elegant. "Ma'am, they're cows. Our residents purchased homes here for peaceful rural views. That's what they're looking at." She did not like that. Patricia opened the folder and handed me a printed letter. It had the Briar Creek Estates logo at the top and the words Neighboring Property Impact Notice in bold. I read the first few lines. Dust, odor, early morning tractor noise, livestock visibility, fence maintenance, possible drainage concerns. I handed it back. "This is for your residents. It concerns your property's impact on our community. My property was here before your community. We respect that history," she said, in a tone that meant she did not respect it at all. "But the area is changing. We're hopping to establish cooperative expectations." "Here's mine," I said. "Stay off my ranch." That ended our first conversation. It did not end Patricia. Over the next year, she sent letters. Notices, requests, complaints, invitations to meetings I did not attend, and once a proposed ranch interface agreement, which sounded like something a committee invented after running out of useful work. She complained about dust from my gravel road. She complained about my tractor lights before sunrise. She complained that my hay bales were visible from 3 lots. One letter said the appearance of rusted farm equipment near the boundary created emotional inconsistency with the community's premium lifestyle promise. I kept that one. Sometimes a man needs proof that foolishness has paperwork. My wife, Clara, used to read those letters and shake her head. Clara passed 3 years ago, but I can still hear her voice sometimes. "Thomas," she would say, "that woman doesn't want cooperation. She wants ownership without paying taxes." Clara was usually right. The pond became an issue during Briar Creek's second summer. The eastern edge of my ranch sloped gently toward Amos Pond. From some of the Briar Creek lots, especially the big houses along their west side, you could see the water through the trees. At first, residents just looked. Then a few started walking up to the fence to take pictures. I did not care. Then someone cut a gap in the wire. I fixed it. Then someone did it again. I put up signs. Private property. No trespassing. No lake access. The signs worked for about a week. Then one Sunday afternoon, I found two teenagers fishing from my bank. They were not bad kids, just dumb in the temporary way teenagers often are. They said a woman from the HOA told them the pond was part of the community nature corridor. I sent them home. Then I called Briar Creek's management office. Patricia called back within 10 minutes. Mr. Reddick, the pond borders our conservation area. No, it borders my fence. Our residents have long understood that water feature to be part of the natural amenity zone. Your residents can understand whatever they want from their side of the fence. She sighed. The kind of sigh people use when they believe they are explaining civilization to a barn animal. The pond visually enhances our community. So does the sunset. You don't own that either. There was a pause. Then she said, "You're making this unnecessarily hostile. Patricia, your residents cut my fence. We have no evidence of that. I do the whole." She ended the call by saying the board would review the matter. That became her favorite threat. The board will review. It sounded official. It meant nothing. A month later, I received a letter from an attorney representing Briar Creek Estates. It claimed the HOA had riparian interest concerns connected to Amos Pond because runoff from Briar Creek contributed to the watershed feeding the pond. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Their storm drains emptied into a county ditch that ran south, not west. None of it fed Amos Pond. But I understood what they were doing. They were trying to make proximity sound like ownership. I hired a lawyer named Rebecca Sloan. Rebecca was small, quiet, and dangerous in the way old barbed wire is dangerous. You don't notice until you're caught. She sent one letter. It explained that Amos Pond sat entirely within my deeded parcel, was not connected to HOA common property, was not subject to shared access, and any entry by residents would be treated as trespass. She attached a survey map from 1998 and a copy of my deed. For a while, Patricia backed off. Not because she accepted the truth. Because she was waiting. People like Patricia do not forget being told no. They just put it in a drawer and take it out later with interest. That later came on a Saturday morning in June. Eli had spent the night at my house because my son and daughter-in-law were out of town for a wedding. He woke up before sunrise, came into the kitchen wearing mismatched socks, and asked if fish ate breakfast. I told him only if the worms were awake. By 6:30, we were walking down to Amos Pond with 2 rods, a tackle box, a bucket, and enough snacks for a child who believed hunger could strike every 12 minutes. The morning was beautiful. Fog sat low over the water. The pecan tree cast a long shadow across the bank. Birds moved in the cattails. Somewhere near the far pasture, a cow complained about something only cows understand. Eli caught the first fish. A bluegill small enough to need encouragement. He held it up with both hands, eyes wide, like he had pulled treasure from the deep. "Grandpa, he's angry. He's been tricked before breakfast. You'd be angry too." We put it in the bucket because Eli wanted to show his father later. By 8:00, I had caught 2 bass worth keeping. Eli had caught 3 bluegill and 1 stick, which he insisted counted because it came from underwater. Then I saw Patricia. She was standing on the Briar Creek side of the fence with 2 people behind her, a man in a polo shirt and a woman holding a phone. Patricia wore white tennis shoes, tan pants, and a sleeveless vest, because apparently even trespass accusations needed an outfit. She cupped her hands around her mouth. "Mr. Reddick." I ignored her. That is a skill every rancher develops. She called again. "Mr. Reddick, you need to stop fishing immediately." Eli looked at me. "Are we in trouble?" "No." "Then why is she yelling?" Some people treat quiet like a challenge. Patricia walked along the fence until she found the gate near the maintenance trail. It was locked. She shook it once, which told me everything I needed to know about her respect for property. Then she pulled out her phone. I kept fishing. That bothered her more than if I had shouted back. 10 minutes later, a patrol SUV came down my ranch road. I had left the front gate open because my son was supposed to drop by later. The deputy drove slowly, careful not to spook the cattle. Patricia's Lexus followed him. That meant she had gone around to the road and driven onto my ranch. Again. The deputy parked near the pond. Patricia parked too close behind him and got out before he did. "That's him," she said. "He's the one illegally removing fish from protected HOA water." The deputy looked at her, then at me, then at Eli, who was holding a worm and looking deeply suspicious of adults. The deputy was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s. His name tag said Miller. "Morning," he said. "Morning. Are you Mr. Reddick?" "Yes." He glanced at the pond. Dispatch said there was a dispute over fishing access. Patricia stepped forward. "Not a dispute. Theft. He has been repeatedly warned that this water feature is part of our protected environmental corridor." I raised one eyebrow. "Water feature." She ignored me. "Our community has invested in the preservation of this natural amenity." I looked around at the pond my grandfather dug with a borrowed bulldozer. "Patricia, the only thing your community invested in here was imagination." Deputy Miller held up a hand. "Let's slow down." Good deputies do that. They slow down loud people so facts can catch up. He asked me, "Sir, do you own this land?" "Yes." "Do you have documentation?" "My house is up the hill, deed, survey, tax map. I can get all of it." Patricia said, "He always says that." Deputy Miller looked at her. "Ma'am, do you have documentation that the HOA owns or controls this pond?" She opened her leather folder. Of course she had brought it. She handed him a glossy community map. I had seen those maps before. Developers love them. They show walking trails, green areas, ponds, parks, and cheerful drawings of trees that were removed to print the map. Patricia pointed to a blue shape near the west side of Briar Creek. There, Community Nature Corridor. Deputy Miller studied it, then looked at the pond, then back at the map. "Is this a marketing map?" "It's part of our community presentation materials." "That's not the same as a deed." Patricia's smile tightened. "The HOA has maintained oversight of the corridor for years." I said from across the fence. She turned on me. "You have interfered with resident enjoyment long enough." Eli whispered, "Grandpa, is she mad because we caught the fish first?" Deputy Miller coughed into his hand. Patricia did not find Eli charming. She pointed at my stringer. "He has taken fish from shared water. I want a citation issued." I looked at Deputy Miller. "Would you like to see the property line?" "Yes, sir." I set my rod down, told Eli to stay on the dock, and walked the deputy to the old fence line. Patricia followed close enough that her shoes started collecting burrs. That pleased me more than it should have. The boundary fence ran between my ranch and Briar Creek. On my side was pasture, pond, and the old dock. On their side was a walking trail with decorative gravel and little signs about respecting nature. One of those signs said, Briar Creek Nature Corridor. Please enjoy responsibly. Patricia pointed at it. See? I stared at her. Did you just use your own sign as evidence? Deputy Miller looked like he was trying not to blink too hard. I showed him the survey stake near the oak tree, then the fence posts, then the no trespassing signs, then the locked gate Patricia had tried to shake open. He took photos. Patricia kept talking. She explained historical use, environmental concern, community standards, resident expectations, amenity protection. Deputy Miller listened politely, then asked one simple question. Has the HOA ever stocked this pond? No, I said. Patricia said, stocking is not the issue. Has the HOA maintained the pond? No, I said. We monitor the area. From a walking trail, I said. Has the HOA paid taxes on the land? Patricia hesitated. That's not how common amenities always work. The deputy looked at her. That's usually how ownership works. There it was. The first crack. Patricia heard it too. Her voice sharpened. Deputy, with respect, this man has a history of refusing cooperation with our board. That is not a crime, Deputy Miller said. He is creating distress for residents. Fishing. In protected water. Protected by who? The association. Do you have legal authority? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Then said, our attorney is reviewing it. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Deputy Miller turned to me. Mr. Reddick, I'm not seeing a criminal issue here. If this is your land, you can fish your pond. Patricia's face went red. You're just taking his word for it. No, ma'am. I'm taking note that you have not provided anything showing the HOA owns it. She pointed toward Eli. There are children watching this. Yes. I said, one of them is learning a lot. Patricia glared at me. The deputy gave me an incident number. Then he told Patricia that any further dispute would need to go through civil court unless she had proof of trespass by me, which was a sentence so ridiculous even he seemed tired by the end of it. Before leaving, Patricia said one thing quietly. Not to the deputy. To me. You keep treating this like it's only your pond. I looked at her. It is. She said, we'll see. Then she walked back to her Lexus, picking burrs from her socks. That should have been the end. But embarrassment makes Patricia's kind reckless. By Monday morning, every Briar Creek resident received an email. Subject line. Urgent, ranch owner HARVSTNG fish from protected community water. I had to admire the word harvesting. Made me sound like I was out there with a commercial net and a pirate flag. The email claimed the HOA had contacted law enforcement after unauthorized removal of aquatic wildlife from the Briar Creek Nature Corridor. It said the board was exploring emergency measures to protect the pond ecosystem from further depletion. Ecosystem. I had pulled out 2 bass and a child-sized bluegill. By noon, my phone was ringing. Some residents were angry. Some were confused. Some were embarrassed. Aaron Pike, a man who lived along the western edge of Briar Creek, called and said, Mr. Reddick, is that pond actually ours? No. I didn't think so. Why? Because the fence is between us and it. That man had a future in basic observation. Then Mrs. Leary called. She was one of the older residents, sharp voice, sharper mind. She said, Patricia is asking for an emergency legal assessment. How much? $500 per household. I whistled. Expensive fish. She says we may need to defend community water rights. Did she show you any deed? No. Then ask for one. Mrs. Leary paused, then said I was planning to ask for several things. That was when I knew Patricia had a bigger problem than me. She had residents starting to read. On Tuesday, Rebecca Sloan called. I've received a letter from Briar Creek's attorney. And they're claiming potential prescriptive rights, environmental stewardship interest, and community reliance. What does that mean in English? It means they don't have a deed. Rebecca filed a formal response that afternoon. She attached the deed, survey, tax records, pond construction history, old aerial photos, and signed statements from 2 retired neighbors who remembered my grandfather digging Amos Pond. Then she requested that the HOA retract its claims and stop telling residents the pond belonged to the community. Patricia did not retract. She escalated. On Thursday, she hired a private environmental consultant to inspect the protected pond. There was one problem. The consultant came through my pasture. Without permission. I found him near the bank wearing rubber boots and holding a sample bottle. He looked about 25 and terrified of grass. Can I help you? I asked. He jumped so hard he nearly dropped the bottle. I'm with Greenpath Environmental. Good for you. I'm here to assess pond health. Who sent you? Briar Creek Estates HOA. I looked at the fence. Then at him. Did you climb over that? He looked back toward the trail. There was a gap. There was not a gap. There was a place where somebody had bent the wire down. That was different. I took his sample bottle and handed it back. You need to leave. I was told the HOA had access. You were told wrong. To his credit, he left quickly. To Patricia's credit, she had now created witnesses. Not useful ones for her, but witnesses. I called Deputy Miller, then I called Rebecca. Then I fixed the fence and added a camera. The consultant sent me an email that evening apologizing. He wrote that he had relied on the HOA's representation that the pond was accessible through community conservation property. I forwarded that to Rebecca. She replied with 2 words. Very helpful. When a lawyer says very helpful, somebody else has made a very stupid mistake. The next week, Patricia called an emergency HOA meeting. Rebecca told me to attend. Why? I asked. Because she's going to talk. She always talks. Yes, Rebecca said, but now we need people to hear it. So I went. The Briar Creek clubhouse looked like every HOA clubhouse ever built. Too much stone, too much beige, and furniture chosen by someone who believed comfort encouraged loitering. The room was packed. Residents filled the chairs. Some stood in the back. Patricia sat at the front table with 2 board members, the community manager, and a man I assumed was the HOA attorney because he looked like he had already regretted taking the file. Patricia opened with a statement about protecting shared assets. Then she put a slide on the screen. A map. The same glossy marketing map she had shown the deputy. There was Amos Pond, colored blue, just outside the actual community boundary, but close enough that whoever made the map had shaded the area around it in green. Briar Creek has always understood this area to be part of the broader conservation corridor, Patricia said. Mrs. Leary raised her hand. Understood by who? Patricia blinked. The community. Based on what document? The room got quiet. Patricia's smile tightened. We are not here tonight to debate technicalities. I leaned back in my chair. There it was. Technicalities. People love calling ownership a technicality when they are trying to take what is yours. Rebecca sat beside me, making notes. Patricia continued. She said the ranch owner had been uncooperative. She said the HOA had a duty to protect residents' expectations. She said if they did not act now, they could lose access forever. Aaron Pike raised his hand. Do we currently have legal access? The attorney shifted in his chair. Patricia said, that is under review. Aaron said, so no. She glared at him. That is not what I said. He replied, it is what you avoided saying. A few people murmured. Then Patricia made the mistake Rebecca had been waiting for. She pointed at me. Mr. Reddick has chosen to exploit an outdated ranch boundary to deprive this community of a natural resource we have promoted, maintained, and relied upon. Rebecca stood. Very slowly. The room turned. My name is Rebecca Sloan. I represent Mr. Reddick. For the record, the boundary is not outdated. It is recorded. The pond is not promoted by any legal instrument we have seen. It has not been maintained by the HOA, and reliance on a marketing map does not create ownership. The HOA attorney closed his eyes. Only for a second. But I saw it. Patricia said, this is a residents' meeting. Rebecca said, then the residents deserve accurate information. That got a few nods. Rebecca passed copies of the survey and deed to the front row. Residents passed them back. The room changed as the papers moved. You could feel it. People who had walked in angry at me began looking confused, then irritated, then focused. That is the power of paper. It does not yell. It just sits there being difficult to deny. Then Mrs. Leary stood again. Patricia, did you call the sheriff on Mr. Reddick for fishing in a pond we do not own? Patricia said, I contacted law enforcement regarding unauthorized activity. That wasn't my question. Silence. Beautiful silence. Finally, the attorney leaned toward his microphone. At this time, the association's rights remain under legal review. Mrs. Leary looked around the room. So yes, that was the third crack. The first was Deputy Miller refusing to arrest me. The second was the environmental consultant trespassing. The third was residents realizing their dues were being used to chase fish in someone else's pond. The meeting ended badly for Patricia. Not officially. There was no vote that night. But authority can leave a person before the title does. And Patricia started walking out of the room with everyone else. 2 days later, Briar Creek's board received Rebecca's demand letter. It required a written retraction of the community email, confirmation that the HOA claimed no ownership or access rights to Amos Pond, reimbursement for fence repairs, and payment of legal fees related to the false police report and consultant trespass. Patricia refused. The board did not. That was important. For the first time, the board split from her. 2 members contacted Rebecca directly through the HOA attorney. They wanted settlement terms. Patricia called that betrayal. I called it arithmetic. There are 120 homes in Briar Creek. At $500 per household, her emergency assessment would raise $60,000. But a real boundary lawsuit could cost far more, and losing it would make the board look like fools. Or worse, liable fools. Then the county got involved. Not because I asked. Because Patricia submitted a request to classify Amos Pond as a protected shared watershed feature. She attached the same marketing map again. Some people learned slowly. The county sent a land records officer named Daniel Reyes. He came out on a Wednesday morning with a tablet, a measuring wheel, and the tired expression of a man who had seen too many confident people misunderstand maps. He walked the boundary, checked the fence, compared the survey, photographed the pond. Then he stood beside me under the pecan tree and said, "This pond is entirely on your parcel." "I know." He looked toward Briar Creek. "Do they know?" "They've been told." He sighed. "Different thing." His report came out 4 days later. It confirmed that Amos Pond was private ranch property, not part of Briar Creek Estates, not within HOA common area, not subject to recorded shared access, and not eligible for community amenity classification. That should have ended it. Patricia tried one more move. She announced a peaceful resident walk along the conservation corridor to show support for protecting community nature spaces. In plain English, she planned to lead residents to my fence and stage a protest. Unfortunately for her, Mrs. Leary had started a resident email chain with the subject line, "Please stop embarrassing us over the pond." It spread faster than Patricia's announcement. On the morning of the planned walk, only 9 people showed up. 3 were board members. 2 were Patricia's friends. 1 was her husband, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. And 4 were residents who came only to make sure nobody climbed the fence. I watched from my porch with binoculars. Eli was beside me eating cereal from a mixing bowl, because grandparent rules are flexible. "Are they coming to take the fish?" he asked. "No." "Good, because the stick fish is mine." By then, the story had become a joke across the county. The feed store heard about it. The diner heard about it. Deputy Miller's report made its way through every coffee circle within 20 miles. Someone at church asked if I needed a license to fish in HOA airspace. I told him not to give Patricia ideas. 2 weeks later, Briar Creek held another meeting. This one had a different tone. No slides. No dramatic language. No emergency assessment. The HOA attorney spoke first. He announced that after review of county land records, the association would withdraw any claim of ownership, access, stewardship control, or enforcement authority over Amos Pond. Then came the retraction. It was read out loud. The previous community communication had created confusion regarding the status of the pond. Confusion. That was the word they chose. Not lie. Not false claim. Confusion. But I was old enough to accept a small word if it carried a big surrender. They agreed to reimburse my fence repair, cover a portion of my legal fees, and send residents a corrected notice. Patricia sat through it with her arms folded. When the attorney finished, Mrs. Leary raised her hand. "Will President Vale be reimbursing the association for the sheriff call, consultant fee, and legal expense caused by her mistake?" The room went very still. Patricia stood. "I acted to protect the community," Aaron Pike said, from a grandpa fishing with his grandson. Someone laughed. Then another. Then several. Patricia's face hardened. That was probably the moment she knew it was over. Not legally. Socially. A bully can survive anger. Anger still treats them as powerful. But laughter. Laughter is different. Laughter means the spell broke. The board formed a records committee the following week. Patricia resigned as president 2 months later, citing personal reasons and a desire to spend more time with family. People always say that when the alternative is explaining themselves. Her replacement was Mrs. Leary. Her first official act was to remove Amos Pond from all community maps, brochures, welcome packets, and trail materials. Her second was to send me a handwritten apology. I still have it. Not because I needed it. Because it was decent. As for Amos Pond, it is still there. Still quiet in the morning. Still muddy after storms. Still full of bass, bluegill, frogs, turtles, and at least one legendary stickfish. Eli comes out whenever he can. He is better at casting now. Still talks too loud. Still asks questions every 5 seconds. Still believes snacks are part of fishing equipment. Last month, he caught a bass big enough to make him yell so loud the cows looked offended. We took a picture on the dock. Behind him, you could see the fence line. Behind that, far off through the trees, the rooftops of Briar Creek. Sometimes I think about Patricia standing on that bank, telling a deputy I was stealing community fish. I think about that glossy map in her leather folder. I think about how easily people mistake confidence for truth, especially when the confidence is printed in color. But land is not owned by volume. Water does not become yours because you can see it from a walking trail. And a fish does not belong to an HOA because somebody shaded a pond blue on a brochure. My grandfather dug that pond with sweat, diesel, and borrowed time. My father built the dock. I maintain the fence. I pay the taxes. And when my grandson drops a worm into that water, he is not stealing anything from anyone. He is learning where he comes from. That is what Patricia never understood. To her, the pond was a feature. To me, it was family. People like her look at old land and see unused control. A dock becomes an amenity. A pasture becomes a view. A pond becomes a selling point. A fence becomes an inconvenience. They believe if they rename something, they can claim it. But a ranch remembers. Every post, every gate, every trail, every pond, every story told there before the houses came. So yes, Patricia called the cops on me for fishing. She pointed, accused, demanded, and waited for handcuffs. Instead, she got a deputy asking for a deed, a lawyer asking for proof, a county officer checking the map, and an entire neighborhood learning that the pond in their brochure belonged to the old man with the fishing rod. And somewhere in the middle of all that, my grandson learned the most important rule of fishing. Always know whose water you're standing beside.